I have my friend TR here, and we're going to be sharing some pretty exciting stuff. I am so excited to take what we did in the podcast on that was shared on Sunday, and we're just going to dive deeper into that. What does it look like to use our finances to bring God glory? What does it look
Mm.
like to be on the same page as a husband and wife and honor God with our money? So I'm so thankful that TR has joined me today. And I just want to open in prayer
Mm.
and then we'll dive in. How's that sound?
Love it.
Okay, let's pray. Dear God, I just thank you so much for this opportunity, just to go back to your word and then to also glean from TR's experience and his understanding of what it looks like to be financially wise according to what you say, not what the world says. God, I pray that you would just remove any technical difficulties. God, just allow people to be able to participate, God, to ask their honest questions. And God, I just pray that in all of this, you would be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So if you have not listened to the Parenting to Impress podcast, that's okay. But I want to encourage you to take time to do that. So even if you listen to it afterwards, that's fine. But definitely go and listen because TR has some really good advice to give. Okay. I've talked too much. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Let's talk. All right. So, one of the things that we talked about in the podcast is that there's multiple personalities. Now, I'm going to tell you, TR, until you told me, I really thought there were two.
For sure. Most people can easily come up with the spender and the saver.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. But one of the tools that we use, we would say that there's actually six different types,
Six
six
different.
different
Okay.
kinds. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about those.
Okay, so and it is just kind of a broad generality. I think it's really important to when we're talking about personality tests of
Hmm.
any sort, really what we're doing is we're trying to find out more about ourselves and more about our
Hmm.
spouse so that we can uh, just start the conversation. And
Hmm.
so for us, what we would say is, there is the saver, okay,
Hmm.
there is the spender, but there's also the avoider type.
Okay. So, what do you mean by avoider?
Okay.
Like, how do I know if I fall into that category?
Sure. So this is the money type that just when it comes to thinking about money, their natural default would be to avoid the conversation in
Okay.
general.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes total sense. The video is turning on us. I apologize.
Okay.
Let's try that. There we go.
There we
Now
go.
we got it.
Perfect. Then you've got the planner. And the
Okay.
planner and the saver, you would think that they're kind of the same, but they're
Hmm.
not. The planner really enjoys thinking long term about their money.
Okay.
And then there's the taker type. Okay, the risk
Hmm.
taker. This is the person that would really love to like invest. They're
Hmm.
always thinking
Hmm.
about the bigger, better deal
Hmm.
or buying this next thing and turning it for a profit.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and there's the giver type. Okay, and you can have kind of a combination of
Hmm.
any one of these or both of these as your primary and your secondary.
Hmm.
But it's just a great way to kind of start the conversation. Know who you are, know who your spouse is, and then know that you have strengths and weaknesses.
And I think that's what's so important about this is looking at, when we go into marriage, we love those opposite things about our spouse.
Mm, yes,
And then we get into marriage and we realize, oh, that's not really how I thought that was going to play out.
for sure.
And it's definitely the same thing in finances, in looking at how we look at money. A lot of times is completely opposite. So does that
Mm.
mean we married the wrong person?
Well, let me put it to you this way. So my wife and I,
Mm-hmm.
we both score really high on security type and the planning type. Both
Mm-hmm.
of us, we're kind of the same person.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is we struggle in our natural self. We struggle with the giving, and we struggle naturally with kind of being carefree and spontaneous with our money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But since we're both the same, we struggle the same.
Right.
And one of the
Right.
beauties of being complementary and being made with a masculine and feminine perspective, oftentimes some of the beauties of that is just our different takes on things. And if you have someone that's exactly like you, one of you's really not needed. And so
That's
it's
right.
it's nice to have slight differences. Even if you have the same personalities, there's going to be nuances
Mm-hmm.
to how you think about money and how you use it to forward the kingdom of God. And so I think it's kind of just a fun conversation. Even if you're the same or even if you're different, it doesn't really matter as long as you know your spouse and can utilize that for your benefit of your family and God.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point is that opposites, yes, they attract, but they also can really work well together. Because where I know in my own marriage, where my husband is really strong, that's maybe a weakness of mine, or vice versa. And so we can help each other and carry and balance out each other
Mm,
that way.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so if you're just joining us, I am Heidi Franz of Parenting to Impress podcast and blog, as well as the writer and creator of ABC Jesus Loves Me. And I'm joined by TR, who is with
Freedom 51 Ministries. We're a financial coaching ministry that is set out to change the financial destiny of families around the world. And so we usually work with people one-on-one for 6 months to a year to work on the three big issues around money, which are communication, habits, and mindset. And we do that while using the Bible as our biblical lens to our finances. We want to have
absolutely,
a biblical worldview when it comes to our money.
which is what we always talk about on Parenting to Impress. What does the Word of God say? We
Absolutely.
always start there. So, tonight, what we're going to do is be answering your questions. I already have some of those written down. We've started talking about the personalities, and I want to, like we did in the podcast, talk more about how does a marriage move forward when you're not on the same page.
Mm.
But we definitely want to get to your questions. So please be adding your questions to the comments, and we will get to those just as soon as we possibly can. But while we're on this subject of different personalities, different motivation, and not being on the same page, what do you do in a marriage situation where you have, this was a question on Facebook that I had, that you are complete opposites? So
Mm.
let's say as the wife, I am very geared towards beautification, experiences,
Hmm.
making things beautiful in my home, making our family look beautiful. Maybe that's in clothing or those different, but beauty is my focus. Where my husband is focused on highly structured
Mm.
finances, organization. To me, those seem like very extremes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how does a married couple that have totally different motivations with money,
Mm.
how can they move forward at all?
So I'm gonna use a word here. It's kind of a hot topic word. I'm gonna use the word budget. Okay. A lot of people don't like the word budget. In fact,
Right.
we actually stopped using it a few years back. We
Uh-huh.
used the word spending plan,
Uh-huh.
but they're kind of interchangeable.
Uh-huh.
I think spending plan's a little bit more 2023 and budget's kind of old
Right.
school. But sometimes it can be a trigger word for people. It really can.
Mm-hmm.
So where they hear the idea of being on a budget and they're thinking, we've got to live on rice and beans until we're completely out of debt and we can never buy anything
Yep.
for the house. And so these are some of the baggage that comes with your money mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say that you have that situation. You have the husband wants one has one motivation and the wife has one that's completely different. The interesting thing is if you lay out your finances on a monthly basis and you look at it even from a yearly perspective, so you back out and you look at it from a yearly perspective, this is really it's not just how you spent your money, it's a list of your values.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So one of the things is you can start just by analyzing where you've already been. So assuming
Mm-hmm.
that you're not talking about day one of your marriage, okay,
Mm-hmm.
you have a track history of the way that you spend your money, and that the way that you spend your money would often show you where your values lie. And so if they're separate, they're already on the same page. They're already in your bank statement. They're
Mm-hmm.
already on your
Mm-hmm.
credit card bill, and so they technically are on the same page. We just need to make sure that we have those discussions because they're even though they're on the same page, they're not often shared.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
So
that's the first thing.
is that what you say for couples? Is first of all just starting those conversations?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So before you start talking about cutting here or cutting there, or this money amount, it's not going to work for us in the
Mm-hmm.
future. Just take a look at the past. Take a look at where
Mm-hmm.
you've been. It
Mm-hmm.
could be as simple as pulling your bank statement for the last month if you don't currently have a budget, and going through that and having those conversations. Where did we spend the money last month? Um, not not assigning, good or bad to that, but just
Mm-hmm.
analyzing where you currently have
Mm-hmm.
already walked.
But I think as humans, what we want to do is we want to go back or I'm sorry, what we want to do is just want to look forward. We
Mm,
want to forget about the past and go, well, I'm just going to look forward. I'm going to start with this budget today. We're all going to follow it.
right.
But if we don't understand what's happened in the past, we can't create a future.
Mm. So it's important that, like what we tell people in coaching is that there's no shame, there's no blame, there's just steps forward. And
Hmm.
so we can use the
Yeah.
information from last month to inform where we currently
Mm-hmm.
are, and we can make that information apply in next month's budget. But there's really no sense in arguing
Over the past.
over the past, and so we can
Mm-hmm.
only try to take steps forward. Now,
Mm-hmm.
before we ever get to that point, before we get to the point to where we're planning ahead and we're trying to plan ahead together, it's always important to really have the why conversation. You ever heard of the why
Yeah,
conversation?
yeah. But you're exactly correct. Before we started going live, we talked about this why and how many times that came up in our conversation as we were preparing for this time. So explain the why and then let's dig into it a little deeper.
So when we sit down with a couple, we would start off on two separate pages. We would have the husband list out what he would like to achieve with his money. Then we ask the wife, what would you like to achieve with your money? And then we say, okay, it really is all our money, and really it's all God's money. And so, like, the perspective shift on
Mm-hmm.
just understanding and moving from that alone, from it's mine and yours to it's ours, and to it's ours under the headship of the Lord. And so just realizing that first and foremost makes the conversation
Mm-hmm.
different.
But you said something so important right there. We start with you write down your why.
Hmm.
Your spouse writes down your why.
Yes,
It does not have to be this thing that we have to come together at the very beginning.
right.
And is that okay?
It's absolutely okay. In fact, you can do two things simultaneously when
Okay.
it comes to your finances. So, give an example that we've heard before. Let's
Mhm.
say the wife wants to do a remodel, and the husband is really looking to save and invest more.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where they're at.
Mhm.
The question is not, does it have to be an either or? The question at this stage is, why do you want that? And
Yeah.
why do you want that? And how are you going to feel if you get it? How are you going to feel if you don't? And really getting down and finding out what the motivation of our spouse is
Mhm.
really important.
Mhm.
It's important to know where their heart is on these things. And you may find that it actually is more important to them than what you originally thought. And so
Mhm.
you can start allocating your funds
Mhm.
according to the importance that you really didn't have an idea of before you
Yeah.
have that
I love
conversation.
that. Okay, so what you're saying is
Mm,
if you have a husband and wife who are not on the same team, they
yes,
realize personality wise, money motivation wise, they are on opposite teams.
yes,
So then the first thing that they do is they sit down and they write by themselves. They sit down and write why do they want to spend?
hmm,
What is their motivation? Why do they want to save?
yep,
What is their why for their finances?
exactly.
Then what do we do?
So you've got a goal, you've come up with your why. You've
Okay.
attached emotions to the outcome because there are emotions that come with your money. And so here you have that. Now the question is how do we going forward make sure that both of these are represented in an appropriate fashion?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing the intensity of a person, of your spouse, is important when it comes to that particular goal that they have. And so we would call this a monthly money meeting, okay,
Okay.
or a money date.
Mm.
Like there should be a money date. And we've heard of some
Okay.
really good, clever ways to have a money date.
Uh-huh.
One of them is to treat it more like an invite than a demand. So
Okay.
first is like I'm inviting you into the conversation. I'm inviting you into our finances. If there is a what Dave Ramsey would say, a nerd and a free spirit,
Uh-huh.
the nerd really likes to make sure that they've got their budgets and their spreadsheets and all their numbers in order. And it's like then the question is like how do you invite your carefree spouse,
Uh-huh.
your free spirit spouse in to
Mm-hmm.
speak with that? And those are two opposite spectrums, right?
Right.
And so one of the things you do is you have this monthly money meeting, you have this money date, and you sit down and you present, as the nerd, you would present the facts out there. This is where we spent our money, and then you would just be quiet and listen.
And I think that's the hard part. I'm the nerd.
Mm,
And I have already processed all of this because I was the one who created the spreadsheet.
mm,
And so I give it to my husband and I want him to have all this feedback. Well, he hasn't just spent the last few hours creating all that.
right,
And also, he doesn't think that way.
for sure.
And so, one of the things that I've had to learn is to give him time. So, let's say we have this money date. What I need to do is I need to have those spreadsheets and that budget and all that fun stuff for me. I
Mm,
need to give it to him before our money date.
there you go.
Give him time to process that, and then he will. But if I just give it to him and demand an answer,
Mm,
he can't.
for sure. And so oftentimes, like, if you sit it down, it's almost like I expect you to agree with everything that I've already come up
Yeah,
with. And so,
yeah.
you want to start with an
Hmm.
invitation. You really want to
Hmm.
start with having a tone of, I would love for your input on this.
Hmm.
And for some people that's brand new information for them, you
Hmm.
can give it to them ahead of time. It makes
Hmm.
it a lot easier to process. And we
Hmm.
heard about a couple that they would actually go out for burgers. They called it burgers and budgets because the husband responds better when there's
That's
food on the
funny.
table
I
in
do
that
too.
relationship. I
I
mean,
do
yeah, so do I.
too.
And it just made it
Burgers and budget.
easier, you
That's
know.
hilarious.
It is. And so
Right.
so then what do you do? The question always comes up. What do you do when there's particular arguments over um, how money has been spent? And if
Hmm.
you're in charge of one particular task at home,
Hmm.
maybe it's like the grocery shopping, that's
Hmm.
always a bit of a contention in
Hmm.
families. And the husband sits down and he hasn't looked at the finances all month, and now we've got this monthly meeting, right?
Hmm.
And we've went over on the amount that we thought we would spend.
Hmm.
What do you
Which
do?
so many people, myself included, I can relate to that right now. With
Mm,
inflation and how much groceries have gone up, it's very easy to go, oh, wow.
yes.
So, what do you do in that situation?
Well, let me speak specifically into the inflation and the food thing.
Hmm.
So our estimation before COVID was about $250 per person
Per month?
per month.
Per month. Okay,
So family
$250
of
per month.
four, you're talking about $1,000.
Okay.
Just that now these are just guidelines. This would change depending on if you're an Aldi shopper or a Whole Food shopper.
Very true.
Okay, it's
Very
going to
true.
depend a lot. If you're making a lot of pot meals like soups and casseroles versus if you're eating fresh produce and meats. Okay,
Right.
so like it's
Right.
going
Absolutely.
to differ quite a lot. And then
Hmm.
how old are the kids? If it's a family of four,
Right.
older, like once they get to teenage years, it's just all money is off the table. You just go ahead and get a loan.
That
But
is true.
here's what we've seen though after
Okay.
COVID. So after COVID, you had the spike in prices.
Hmm.
Now it's more around the 3 to 350 per person. And so we've
Wow.
seen we've seen a big jump. The numbers kind of match up for that.
Hmm.
But my boss, who's been doing financial coaching for years, said that he went to his wife who uh, was complaining because she was not able to get enough of the food for their budget, and
Hmm.
this argument kind of happened, and they were able to. He said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll just take over the grocery shopping." And he did. He went out and he did the
Uh-huh.
grocery shopping. He came home with big bunches more food and said, I figured out what the problem was. She's really curious because she's been trying and stressing
Yeah.
for months, like not getting close to the number and not having enough food in the house. And then of course, family complaining. There's not enough food in the house, you know. So it's like she's been feeling this stress. He goes, well, I figured out what the problem was, and it only took me one grocery shopping trip to figure it out. And he said, we haven't budgeted enough money for groceries. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
that is
So
exactly correct. Yeah,
sorry to take a tangent on that, but
right.
that is one that we hear quite frequently is you know the food is just really expensive.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I hijacked by bringing in the inflation
Sorry.
thing here. No, that was my fault because we've got a
Mm,
husband and wife that aren't on the same team and they're shocked because why are you spending so much on X?
right.
And we'll leave the inflation out of it because you have a
Okay.
really good point. That is a concern that I know a lot of the families are having. And if you have other concerns, make sure you leave those in the comments so we can definitely cover those. But you things you have somebody you're at your burger and budget. I
Yep.
love that.
Thanks.
And somebody gets upset.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Yeah. That's
And
exactly
I'm going
right.
to tell you, I've been in that situation. We were not eating burgers, but we were in a situation that there was not agreement on how on a specific item.
Right. Okay.
So tell me how I should have handled it.
Ooh. So now we're talking conflict resolution. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
Right.
The important thing to know is like that you're on the same team. Okay.
Yeah.
Like you have to
Yeah.
start off knowing that you're on the same team. Uh, have you ever heard about Belgian horses?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so Belgian horses, they're big horses. They're these
Okay.
pack horses. I've been told that a single horse can pull 8,000 pounds by itself.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay, so big, like Clydesdales. They're just
Mm-hmm.
big, massive
Mm-hmm.
horses. When they pair two Belgian horses together that are complete strangers, they've never met before, and they get them together, you would think that they could then pull 16,000 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? 8,000 and 8,000, but they can actually pull 24,000 pounds because they have a partner that is right
Mm.
alongside them.
Okay.
Now, if you train them
Mm-hmm.
for 6 weeks to work together and you make sure that the yoke that's around their neck is an equally yoked partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one is matching the other,
Mm-hmm.
32,000 pounds. They can pull
Mm-hmm.
32,000 pounds
Mm-hmm.
together when only one can pull eight. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's important to know that your spouse is not your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're arguing over a particular number or a particular part of your budget, working together is going to be the best way out of the situation.
Mm. I love that. And boy, how biblical is that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is marriage, godly
Mm,
marriage in a beautiful illustration when we can be on the same team. Um, there is a marriage guy who writes marriage books.
okay.
Do not remember his name, but he says so often, and it continually it plays in my head, your spouse is not your enemy.
Mm,
Your spouse is not your enemy. And so many times I go into a situation and I'm upset about something when if I would just adjust the glasses
mm,
and see that Michael is on my team and it will change everything. And I think it especially changes the money.
mm,
And then the next thing is getting down, peeling back those layers in the onion and getting to the root of why is my husband wanting to do this? Or why am I not wanting him? Or whatever the reason is, what is really the reason? Is it that it makes me feel insecure? Does it make me feel unheard? Does it make him feel like I don't care about his wants? What is it if we'll take that time to get down to the basics?
mm. One of the underlying narratives from that is different for husbands and wives, and this is not for everybody, but generally speaking, wives are asking, "Are we okay?" When it comes to the
Mm-hmm.
money, they're saying, "Are we okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are we as a family? Are we going to be okay?"
Mm-hmm.
And so in those conflict times, having some reassurance
Mm-hmm.
where the guy can say
Mm-hmm.
to the wife in the situation like we're going to be okay is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there was a time where my wife lost a job,
Mm-hmm.
and um, that was her big question, like, where are we at?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to reassure her and say, hey, we're okay. We have an emergency fund for this particular
Mm-hmm.
reason. And
Mm-hmm.
so to build that in and to have those conversations is a big deal. Now, the underlying narrative for men is, am I enough? Am I providing enough? Is the amount of money that I'm bringing, is it
Mm-hmm.
enough for our family? And
Mm-hmm.
so when we're having a discussion and a conversation, it gets a little bit heated. Oftentimes, as a husband, I'm feeling that I haven't done my job as a provider.
Mm-hmm.
Even, and having like, well, you could have spent more money if I made more money, or if I
Mm-hmm.
brought more money in, or if I did a better job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like it wouldn't have been a problem. And so I'm feeling those insecurities on myself. And
Right, that
so
pressure.
peeling back and getting
Right.
down to the core of that is
Right.
is key.
Oh, I like that. And as wives, if we can understand that fear that our husbands are having, we can approach all of this completely different.
Mm, absolutely.
Completely different. We can approach it with love and respect instead of why. Why aren't you? Why can't I? And pointing the fingers. Yeah.
I think it's important to know that the Lord designed us to be complementary. There's a masculine and a feminine
Mm-hmm.
perspective that's brought
Mm-hmm.
in to the family finances, and uh, they're equally important,
That's right.
and they're really good to have when we're talking about the different roles. But before I talk about the different roles that the masculine and feminine perspective can kind of speak into on a regular basis, I want to go back to that monthly meeting. We talked about setting the right tone for the
Mm-hmm.
meeting,
Mm-hmm.
having an invite instead of fight,
Mm-hmm.
kind of mindset. How do I invite my husband, or how do I invite my wife
Mm-hmm.
into that moment?
Mm-hmm.
But also just to know that timing is everything.
Oh, yes.
It's like, when do you bring up hard conversations? At what point in the day?
Yeah, not at 9 o'clock at night.
No, not the best time.
Actually, about 7:15, and I'm done.
Okay.
I'm not a late person.
Okay, okay, okay. So what about like right when they walk in the door, right after work?
Yeah, that's
Is that a
never,
good time to
yeah,
talk about the
that's never a
budget?
good time. Or when
You know?
when you're trying to fix supper and
Mm,
yeah, but that is so crucial. We get mad at our spouse going, "Well, why won't you talk about this?" Well, as I shared before, we haven't given him time to look over and process the budget,
mm,
or we're trying to talk to them at very poor times. So you have a husband and wife come and they say, "Look, we've got 4 kids, ages 6 and under.
okay.
So tell me, when are we not tired? When are we not exhausted? When
Mm-hmm.
are we not changing diapers? When are we not going
Yes.
somewhere? When is it an opportunity?"
Yeah. Yeah. You're in a tight season for time.
Hmm.
I get that.
And I'm going to say right now, having 4 teenagers, it's no easier. It's no easier. It looks different,
Mm,
but it's no easier to find time. I
yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I go, "Oh, yeah, we haven't even discussed that yet." But we should be able to because we have teenagers in the house. So, all that to say,
Mm,
when do you find the right time when you feel like you have no time?
yeah. So just like having a date night with your spouse
Mm-hmm.
is an investment into your marriage,
Mm-hmm.
so is having the budget date nights.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little more nuanced. It might
Mm-hmm.
not seem as romantic, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but it is just as important. It's an investment into your family, and so
Mm-hmm.
it needs to rank up there in priority with investing into your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Finance is the number one cause of divorce. Conflict around finances is the number one cause of divorce. 70% of the people live in paycheck to paycheck, and the vast majority of folks, 2/3 of them, have no written plans. They just don't have anything written down for their money. And we're seeing people in their 50s with, less than $30,000 saved for retirement.
Wow.
And so it's a hard transition to
Mm-hmm.
go from being busy to thinking a little bit more longer term, and
Mm-hmm.
seeing this as an
Mm-hmm.
investment, a time
Mm-hmm.
investment into your family and into your future is probably the best way
Mm-hmm.
to think of it.
When you're looking at that many marriages that are falling apart because of finances, this is something we can't ignore.
Right.
We have got to get on the same page as our spouse. So, we've talked about when we're totally different personalities.
Mhm.
We've talked about when we just argue. At what point do we go, this isn't working? We need to do something drastic.
Yeah.
What is the drastic thing?
Okay. So just like any major conflict,
Hmm.
sometimes the best way to resolve that is to bring in
Yeah,
another party. And so that's
absolutely.
that's how our ministry was kind of born out of that idea. And so,
Hmm.
but it could just be if you're having an issue that you bring in a pastor, somebody from
Hmm.
church, just to sit down and to be able to mediate that conversation,
Hmm.
between you and your spouse.
Hmm.
That's one real easy tip. It's always good to do additional learning, and learning on finances is everywhere, so there's
Hmm.
always something to learn. So yeah, that's a great place to start. Just a couple of quick tips that I've seen that work in relationships. One of them is to kind of know what your spending limit is. This will help resolve a lot of arguments. A spending limit would be like the amount that a husband or wife can spend, an agreed upon amount that you can spend without involving or having a discussion with your spouse.
Okay, so like spending money is
Hmm.
your time. We're not talking about groceries. We're not talking
Nope.
about electricity beyond the have tos.
Beyond the have tos.
Okay.
It could be for clothing, it could be for entertainment, it
Okay.
could be for small vacations, whatever it is, like just having an amount of money that you say,
Okay.
hey, like I'm comfortable with you, my spouse. I'm comfortable with you
Mhm.
spending
Mhm.
$30 on something that comes up. If you know that we need it and you know that we have to have it, we don't have to discuss that.
Mhm.
You can just go ahead and move on that. And what this helps with is what we would call financial infidelity.
Mhm.
Financial infidelity, that sounds like a big bad word, and
Right.
it can get really extreme where you're privately opening credit cards
Sure.
apart from your
Sure.
spouse and doing things completely in like a whole separate page, whole separate house almost.
Mm.
It could be thinking of it that way, but it could be also as
Mhm.
much as you're just spending without regard and then either asking for um, forgiveness later,
Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
having that conversation in
Right.
the beginning, or like if they're not paying attention to the numbers at all, you're just kind of sliding it in under the radar. And
Mhm.
so know what that spending limit is. That's a really good thing.
I like that idea.
There's also something that kind of falls in the same category. We would call it I call it the no cry zone. Okay, the no
Okay.
cry zone. You've heard of a no fly zone. There's a no cry zone. The no cry zone is an amount of money that if you had to spend it on something, and then you're looking at the budget at the end of the month together, and you have this set amount that you don't complain or shame about a particular set of money. So my wife drops her phone, breaks the screen by accident,
Mhm.
has to go get it replaced. It's a hundred
Mhm.
dollars.
Mhm.
If $100 limit, and I'm not going to bring any shame, guilt, or arguments are going to come out or come between our marriage over $100.
Okay. So you just
That's our
set that your
limit.
amount. Okay.
That's our limit. Like
Okay.
if it's $100 or less, we're not going to have that come between us.
Mhm.
And so just to set that number, that's a really good foundational thing
Hmm.
that can make things a little bit easier.
Yeah. Okay, so the goal is that a husband and wife can come together, create a budget, talk about it, use the personalities. So if you have one that is a planner and the other one's a spender, use those personalities for good.
Mm.
Okay, so that's the first level. The second level is to come together, set up some ideas like you've talked about, where you set up the idea that everybody has a spending amount and there's no questions asked about that $30 or $50, whatever it is. Okay, we have a no cry zone. We have all these, the second level to
Yes.
help in a marriage. Sometimes we need to pull in a mediator for somebody who's not financially, emotionally attached
That's
to
exactly
these
right.
sides. So we pull into a mediator. That could be a pastor, it could be a really wise older friend, I always suggest going
Mm,
with older friends who are biblically
good.
wise.
Yes.
Then the next level, we go to someone like you,
Hmm.
financial advisor, counselor to help us.
So yeah, so we would call ourselves financial coaches.
Okay.
There is a legal term called financial advisors and financial planners that
Okay.
have letters after their name and way smarter than I. Okay.
Okay.
And so just to be clear, a financial coach is going to help you. They're going to help you with the behavioral side of money. So when it comes to money, 80% is behavior, 20% is knowledge.
Okay, so if I am a person who I hate numbers, you're telling me to spend wisely, I only have to worry about 20%.
I'm saying the 20% that's knowledge would be how to do a spreadsheet, how
Right.
to do basic math, how to pull in your accounts on a monthly
Yeah.
basis. It's pretty it's small.
Yeah,
There's
that's
very
such a
little you gotta.
small amount.
Yeah, the problem is the 80% is the behavior.
Right.
That's the issue
Right.
that we see.
Yeah, those choices, the
Yes.
self-control.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And the
Yeah, that's the hard
conversations
part.
between spouses. And those are
Hmm.
those are the ones. And so that's where a financial coach comes in.
Okay.
Financial coaches are all over the place. We do a lot of financial coaching on Zoom around the world. Specifically, we love to help missionaries too. So we do a lot of work in the
Mm-hmm.
missionary field because if we can help missionaries with their
Mm-hmm.
budgets, they get to stay in the field longer. So it's kind of our part in fulfilling the Great Commission.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what we would say is bring in somebody to be able to help. A financial planner and a financial advisor, those are more for your investments and your long-term
Okay.
investments. So,
Okay. That makes total sense.
yep.
Okay. So we have our different levels. Now, I love this question that we received here. My husband refuses to budget or plan.
Mm,
What do
yeah,
you do? Or your wife? I mean, that this is not
for
just
sure.
a one gender thing.
Right.
Your spouse is refusing to budget,
Okay.
your spouse is refusing to plan. What do you do?
So so it's important to know when we're talking about budgeting, some people are thinking differently about what even the word budget means. Okay.
Okay.
So sometimes when you're saying the husband refuses to budget or the wife refuses to budget, what you're saying is they refuse to live within their means. So in other words, they're
Okay.
thinking about their spending and
Right.
they don't want to rein it in at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're thinking they don't want to budget because they don't want to literally input the data,
The math
the
part of
math
it.
part of it.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's that part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when they say, "Oh, I don't want to budget," what they mean is, "I don't want to argue with you about money."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so
Okay.
it's important to know, like, the
Right.
reason the avoider is in that spot, if that's their natural personality, is just avoid the numbers. Like, why do they want to avoid? So if it's a person that doesn't want to input the numbers,
Right.
well, I'll input the numbers.
Right.
I
That's
will.
when we go back to the personalities.
Exactly. And
Uh-huh.
and not only that, I'll give you a one page, maybe even half page graphic of how
Mm-hmm.
we did this month. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to give you the 50 different
Right.
transactions we had at
Right.
Aldi's. I can just say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, this is where we fell in this month. What do you think?" And then I
I
can
love that.
stop
Mm-hmm.
and wait for them to come back into the deal.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the person not wanting to budget, that doesn't also mean that they don't want to be included in the financial decision process. And we've come up with a thing. We've actually come up with 12, and it's a work in progress, but 12 different financial roles that um, that are just needing to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but also needing both a masculine and a feminine perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a person doesn't want to actually enter the data, let's say they are not the spreadsheet guru,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Maybe they're the bill payer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're the ones that actually sits down and writes out the bills.
Right.
Maybe the organizational side is not their forte, and so they're not a bill payer. They're not the spreadsheet guru, okay? But at that point, I would invite them in to be the advisor.
Mm-hmm.
This is the person that takes a look at the data and helps to make
Uh-huh.
the
Right.
bigger
Right.
decisions. And
Yeah.
so we've come up with 12 different roles, and rather than go through them, I put them on our website, freedom51.com, under financial discipleship, which is under the resource section. You'll see this little PDF that we have there for you to print out and
Perfect.
just
And
kind of
we'll
know all
we'll put
those.
a link to that in the comments as well. So you can find a link to take you directly to that. One of the things that I think, talking about the different personalities, different roles, how about an investigator? Somebody
Mm.
who loves to find the best deals,
Oh,
to
yes.
do the research.
Mm.
I hate that part.
Really?
Yes, I do not like that part. But somebody who can go in, and so using what you can, but
Mm.
I want to go back to what you said here. Okay, a husband or a wife refuses to budget.
Mm-hmm.
TR, you said something so important that I had never thought about. Budget doesn't mean what I think budget means every time. Because when you say that, I'm thinking spreadsheets.
Right.
But you are so right, because maybe budgeting to them means they just don't want to argue.
Right.
So then if you have a spouse who is saying, I'm not going to argue with you
Mm.
because this is not going to work,
Right.
that's when I think we go back to that pulling in a mediator, pulling in a counselor, pulling in a financial coach, somebody who can be an outside perspective to be able to help you figure out, pull back that onion,
Mm-hmm.
all those layers,
For
and
sure.
figure out what is the base of this. Okay, I want to we are actually, it's 8:15.
Ooh.
We've
Okay.
got 15 minutes,
Okay.
which, oh my goodness, there's been so many good things in here. I have loved this so much. And please, if you have not listened to the podcast, parentingtoimpress.com, part 1 is already out. In a week and a half, we will release part 2, where we're going to be talking about how do you teach your
Mm.
kids finances. And if anything that I've learned in our conversation, Coach T, is that we have got to do a better job about training our kids. But we're scared to train our kids because we don't feel adequate in this. We don't feel like we have it done well, or we're avoiding, so we don't want to train our kids. So be sure to listen to that next podcast, because I think you're going to find some really good tips.
Mm.
And I'll be having a blog that will include even more. So be watching for that. Okay, here's a question that we
Okay.
had. So, as a husband and spouse, or husband and spouse, as a husband and wife, you are meeting your needs. So, God has provided you with jobs, the needs are being met. You're able to buy the groceries, the electricity, all the needs are being met.
Okay.
Now, how do you balance giving
Mm.
and buying what you want?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the giving.
Okay?
I think this is a really fun principle, but my wife and I, we like to decide what we're going to give on the minimum side at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
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 And so we know about what we're going to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decide from a giving perspective, at least we're going to give this amount.
Okay.
All right. And we start setting up the transfers into our ministry account for our giving. And that is, like I said, that's our minimum. I
Mm-hmm.
think it follows the same principles as the first fruits principle. And so we've
Mm-hmm. I love
decided in
that.
our heart what we want to give
Mm-hmm.
before all the life situations happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can reevaluate and say, okay, well, this life situation happened. Do we need to make those changes? And for me, it's often a no. Like we've
Mm-hmm.
decided already to give
I love that.
no matter what,
I love
for
that.
these particular areas. And so that's the giving side.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other part of the deal?
So you've got the giving. And I
Okay.
also want to add in real fast, podcast part number 2, we discuss giving in a lot more detail. So
Hmm.
also check out that. Okay. So needs are being met.
Yep.
Now, how do we balance giving
Right.
and wants?
Okay, so I think the important thing for once is to make sure that you are saving slowly, saving little bits at a time with for a given purpose.
Okay.
And so I love the idea of giving every dollar a name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, every dollar gets a job. We know where all the money is going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
And those can be broad categories.
yes, it can be broad
Yeah.
category. You don't have to separate them out into the minutia. But if you have something that you want, you figure out, do the research, how much it's going to cost, and plot a plan to get to that direction. And then as you're going, prayerfully asking if this is still something that we want and we want
Mm-hmm.
to bring in for our family, especially for the bigger purchases.
Right.
those big things. This is where you bring in, when we're talking about roles, you bring in the negotiator,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that person that has that role to try and get better deals, and you do the investigator where you're trying to find out
Mm-hmm.
the best quality. But to take that time and to slowly process it, to not have immediate gratification, that's not just good for our children, that's good for us as
Yeah.
adults.
Oh, I like that.
Even if you have a pool of money, if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't already allocated for a specific job, if it's aside from your emergency fund and you've just got this extra pool of money, you don't make decisions based on what you have. You make decisions on what's coming
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love the idea of, okay, this is our goal. We want this. So let's start planning for it.
For
And
sure.
let's start putting aside to it and or putting aside money for it, not taking from anything else.
Mm,
We're not taking from what we're giving to God. We're not taking from what we need. We're not taking from long-term expenses or college expenses or whatever it is. We're going to start setting aside a certain amount for that want because it is a want.
that's exactly right.
Love that.
And that's why we like, that's another reason why we like the word spending plan versus
Mm-hmm.
budget. A budget is kind of like you set the numbers and that's it. A
Mm-hmm.
spending plan, it's like, well, no, we have a new thing that we want to spend on.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we start monthly saving for that?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another good tool.
Well, and just like we teach our kids, wait, start saving for that wait because you might find in 6 months you really didn't want that as much as what you thought you did.
For
And
sure.
so part of that delayed gratification is, do I still desire this? And then that gives you the time to take it to God and go, God, do you still desire this for us?
For sure.
The other thing that I would say about that on your wants, do they match up with your family goals?
Mm,
If your family goal is to have a home, that's one of our family goals, is to have a home that people feel welcome and feel safe in. So does that match up with our family goal?
mm,
We had a very small house, and multiple years ago we added on a little section because that met with our family goal to provide space for the kids youth groups, for our community groups, and etc. Doesn't meet up with our family goal.
mm.
The one more thing that I wanted to say, because you've talked about the getting together and doing the burgers and budget. um, I'm trying to think of a P word. There's nothing, pasta and planning.
That works too. I like
Whatever
it.
you want it to be. But one of the things that I talk a lot about, especially with families who are on a budget, who are watching how they're spending, they don't have family around, they don't have babysitters. There is nothing wrong with a pan of brownies on a Saturday night after you put the kids to bed
Mm,
and you guys just sit down together. You do not have to go somewhere. You don't have to have something extensive. Don't let the expectations ruin the opportunity.
mm,
One of the things that we have had the opportunity to do is my mom and dad watch our kiddos for a few days before Thanksgiving. And that has provided my husband and I an opportunity to go to a hotel, do some activities, see some things, sightsee. But we always make time to talk about budgeting
mm,
and we do this in November. So, how did the year go? What did it look like to
mm,
for our spending? Did our spending match our family goals? And so that's an opportunity to get together,
mm.
trade off with a family. You watch their kids, they watch your kids so that you can have those times. Brenda just posted pizza and planning.
Oh,
Now,
pizza and
why didn't
planning.
I think of pizza?
Of
That's a great
course.
one.
No,
That's a great one.
that is a good one.
All right, we have another question, and then get your questions in because we're running out of time and we'd love to answer those. Here's a question. If you're a spender,
Mm,
what are some of the practical ways you can start to modify this behavior?
okay. So uh, that would be the first question is do you want to modify the behavior? Okay. If you're
Yeah,
if
you can't
you're
force that.
you can't force it.
Mm-mm.
Somebody has to want that, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't want that someone else either,
Mm-hmm.
which is equally important.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that you know that you're a spender, that you know
Mm-hmm.
that yourself, and you know you're naturally a spender,
Mm-hmm.
and you do want to modify that because
Mm-hmm.
it's causing some issues, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I think deciding how you spend is just as important, deciding how much. So how you spend, what do you use, when do you buy? It's if you are a spender, allotting yourself a certain amount and lowering that amount is a good way to wean yourself off.
Okay, so it's a gradual thing.
Gradual thing.
Yeah.
Uh, if you have credit cards, okay, if
Mm-hmm.
you're a person that has credit cards, those can be really dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
and they've designed credit cards were designed to take away from the pain center part of the brain. Okay, so when you use cash back in the day, you'd use cash. You
Mm-hmm.
would hand a waitress two $20 bills, and she would hand you two nickels. The pain center
Mm-hmm.
would go off, and it would
Mm-hmm.
hurt, and this would help to modify your behavior.
Right.
Okay. When you use a credit card, the pleasure centers of your brain go off. It's a little bit different because
Mm-hmm.
you're just walking out with what you just bought,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not
Mm-hmm.
associating the purchase with the
Right.
pain. It's a
Right.
delayed response. Even after the month goes by and you do an autopsy on your spending,
Mm-hmm.
the pain is not the same as when you
Mm-hmm.
made the purchase in
That
the first
initial,
place.
sure.
And so for some people, if you're looking to modify, putting yourself on a cash budget, old school cash envelopes, I know that's really
Mm-hmm.
strange, can work. Another thing is if you're not into the cash side, you open up a debit card and you feed into that debit card only the amount that you want to spend for the month. It
Mm-hmm.
will make you so cautious. We do this a lot and teach this a lot for grocery spending and
Mm-hmm.
eat out spending.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll make you so cautious that you'll check it before you go when it starts getting, especially towards the end of the month,
Right.
how much that balance is. And
Right.
that will change whether you go to a sit down restaurant or you grab something that's a little bit less expensive
Or you eat at home that time.
or you eat at home. Hey, here's a little tip for you on the eat at home
Yeah.
part. I don't know if you know this, but restaurant food costs, I'm a restaurant guy.
Yeah.
I grew up in restaurants, is about 30%, just in general, what their food cost is. 30%.
30% of what they're charging?
30% of what they're charging. So let's just pretend you were to go and you had a
Oh,
$100
wow.
bill at a restaurant. It cost them $30 to prepare the food with maybe even the to-go containers and all that. Okay, so if
Okay.
if you spend $30 at the grocery store, it's like
Right.
getting a $100 meal. Okay,
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that
and and
much.
and, and the money levels will even out. So if you're looking to save a hundred
Uh-huh.
dollars on your eat out, you just
Right.
increase your groceries $30.
Right.
And so just to keep those numbers in mind, it can be sometimes it can be helpful.
Wow. I like that. And yeah, I really like that. I like that imagery. One of the things that we talk to our kids about is when you go out to a restaurant, let's talk about how much you just paid for that drink
Hmm.
versus how much it would actually cost at the grocery store versus water.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
so that was something that we did with our kids is just basically from the beginning, unless a drink was included, it was water. And we talked about why and we explained why and how that then we're able to use this money in other ways. Yeah.
No, that's great. We talk about like, does it need to be a sit down restaurant versus a counter serve?
Mm-hmm.
With even the tip, it's 20%.
Right.
Just
Right.
just to refill your drink a couple of times and bring the food. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can plan a little bit with that. You can still have a great time at a
Mm-hmm.
counter serve restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Still have a sit
Oh,
down meal
absolutely.
and enjoy not having to prepare the food yourself. If you
Right.
have, a set budget that you're looking for, that's an easy way to kind of save
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, I love that. TR, this has been so good.
It's fun.
This has been, I've learned several things, and I hope it's been very helpful to you as well. If you have questions, definitely send those to me through Facebook. You can add them to this video as well. But I invite you to check out the podcast because I think you will find it so helpful.
Mm.
Parenting to Impress podcast, as well as the blog parentingtoimpress.com. And then be sure to listen to part 2 that will be coming out in about a week and a half. And if you subscribe, then you'll get notification when that podcast goes live. But this has been helpful. I want to end with one thing. You have a prayer for couples
Mm.
to pray. Do you want to share that with us? And we're going
Yeah.
to close. And then I will put that prayer in the comments so that you can print it off, pray it with your spouse. And then I'm so excited to see what God does with this
Mm.
time, with this podcast. So, would you close us in prayer, praying for the couples watching, please?
Absolutely. So often finances and marriage are catalysts for arguments. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is a great prayer before you enter into that budget meeting, before you're sitting down talking about the family finances. And it would go something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Father, I pray for effective communication between me and
Mm-hmm.
my spouse. Holy Spirit, please help each one of us to respond to each other in love, grace, and kindness. May the tone of our voices and our body language represent the respect we have for each other. Help us to process any frustrations together as one flesh, unified towards your higher purposes. Help us to be patient, full of understanding and wisdom as we communicate. Let us be mindful stewards of your resources, seeking to honor you in all that we have. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Mm.
If you want to get in touch with TR, he is available for financial coaching at Freedom 51 Ministry. And again, we will put that we'll put that web link in the comments as soon as we're finished. So thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you on the Parenting to Impress podcast soon.